Just imagine, 2 decades ago in Africa, the ground started to crack wide open. In some places, the cracks were so huge that they split a man's house into 2. It's like nature decided to draw new lines across the land. This was the beginning of something big. Africa is splitting into 2. A continental rift is happening, and one day, this could lead to new continents, islands, and even oceans. The world as we know it will never be the same again. But why is Africa breaking apart? What's causing this split? And what does this mean for Africa and the rest of the world? In 2005, people started to notice and report that Africa was experiencing a continental rift. This is when a continent begins to tear apart, slowly splitting into 2 or more pieces. If this sounds extreme, don't worry, it's actually a totally natural part of how our planet works. In fact, all the continents on Earth today exist because of rifts and the movement of tectonic plates, which are huge slabs of Earth's crust that move around, bumping into and drifting away from each other. To understand what's happening in Africa now, we need to take a look back in time, way back. Millions of years ago, our planet was one giant landmass called Pangaea, surrounded by one vast ocean. Over millions of years, the Earth's outer shell, called the crust, heated up, cooled down, and started to crack. These cracks are where the first continents began to form. And even though it feels like the Earth is still beneath our feet, it's actually constantly moving and changing. The Earth's crust, also known as the lithosphere, is made up of about 15 to 20 tectonic plates. They are always shifting, either moving toward or away from each other. Think of these plates like pieces of a cracked eggshell floating on a hot, molten sea beneath the surface. One of the coolest things to notice is how South America and Africa's coastlines look like they fit together, almost like puzzle pieces. That's because they used to be attached. Over millions of years, these plates moved apart, creating the Atlantic Ocean. Today, in East Africa, something similar is happening. The Somalian plate is moving away from the larger Nubian plate, causing the ground to split. This separation is known as the East African Rift. This rift stretches from the Red Sea all the way down to Mozambique, over 2,000 miles long. If the Somalian plate continues to pull away from the Nubian plate, it could one day cause Africa to split into 2 parts. But don't get too excited just yet. It will take about 5 to 10 million years for this to happen completely. Still, it's incredible to think that future maps of the world might look totally different from what we know today. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Instead of Africa breaking cleanly into 2, there might be smaller splits along the way. One scenario suggests that parts of Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti, and eastern sections of Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique could become their own landmass, forming a new island. If this happens, the Indian Ocean could flood into the gap, creating a brand new sea. For countries like Ethiopia and Uganda that are landlocked, the appearance of a new coastline could change everything. With access to the ocean, their economies could get a massive boost from new opportunities for trade and shipping. According to experts like marine geophysicist Ken McDonald, the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden might eventually pour into the East African Rift, forming a new ocean and separating this part of Africa into its own mini-continent. The rift is growing, but slowly, about as fast as your fingernails grow, so there's no rush to pack your bags for the new continent just yet. So, what's causing these massive rifts in the Earth's crust? Well, geologists are still figuring that out. But one popular idea is that it all starts deep beneath the Earth's surface, in a layer called the mantle, which is kind of like a super thick soup that's always bubbling and moving around. Sometimes, these movements in the mantle push tectonic plates apart. It's a slow process, so slow, in fact, that you wouldn't even notice it happening. But over millions of years, this gradual movement can create huge gaps in the Earth's crust. A rift valley is born, where the Earth's core heats the crust. In areas like central Kenya and northern Ethiopia, the heat builds up, creating what are called thermal bulges. These bulges stretch the crust until it fractures, causing the ground to split apart. This process can also trigger volcanic eruptions, which often happen along the edges of the rift. Instead of just one big volcano erupting, lava can flow out along the cracks in the earth, almost like water during a flood. One of the most noticeable features of the East African Rift is the Rift Valley itself. A rift valley is a long, low-lying area formed when the Earth's crust pulls apart. These valleys can appear both on land and underwater, and they're different from river valleys or glacial valleys because they are shaped by tectonic activity, not erosion. Rift valleys often form at triple junctions, where three tectonic plates meet. Two of the plates pull away to form an ocean, while the third sometimes creates a rift valley, which may or may not fill with water. An example of a rift valley created by a triple junction is the Atlantic Ocean, which started in the Gulf of Guinea on Africa's west coast. As two of the junction's arms split, the ocean was formed, while the third arm created a rift valley. Underwater rift valleys can also divide huge mountain ranges. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is a perfect example. Here, the North American and Eurasian plates are slowly moving apart, creating a rift valley on the ocean floor. This rift is still growing, at about an inch per year. Over time, this movement has created massive valleys underwater, as wide as 9 miles. Rift valleys can even be found in the Pacific Ocean, where the Pacific Plate is moving away from the North American, Cocos, Nazca, and Antarctic plates. Some underwater rifts have hydrothermal vents, where superheated water from deep inside the Earth's crust is released into the ocean, creating unique ecosystems. Back on land, the Great Rift Valley is probably the most famous rift valley in the world. Stretching from the Middle East to Mozambique, it's known for its volcanic activity, hot springs, geysers, and frequent earthquakes. The Great Rift Valley also contains two main branches, the Western Rift, also called the Albertine Rift, and the Gregory Rift. These valleys are dotted with volcanoes, from Mount Kenya to Tanzania's Mount Kilimanjaro. The Western Rift is home to some of Africa's deepest lakes, like Lake Tanganyika and Lake Malawi, which hold incredible biodiversity. In fact, Lake Malawi alone has over 800 species of fish, making it one of the richest lakes in the world. Now, rift valleys don't just sit there, looking pretty. They're constantly changing, growing, evolving. In some cases, rift valleys can even lead to the birth of new oceans. Yeah, you heard that right, new oceans. Take the Red Sea, for example. It was once just a rift valley, but over time, as the African and Arabian plates continued to pull apart, water from the surrounding areas started to fill the gap. And boom! A brand new sea was born. So, in a few million years, if you're planning a beach vacation, who knows, you might be lounging next to a newly formed ocean, courtesy of a rift valley. But not all rift valleys are future oceans. Some are just happy being valleys, content with their deep cracks, tall cliffs, and dramatic landscapes. And speaking of dramatic, the scenery around rift valleys is often some of the most jaw-dropping on Earth. Imagine standing on the edge of a rift, looking down into a valley that stretches out as far as the eye can see. The ground below you is cracked and scarred, a testament to the immense forces that shaped it. Mountains rise up on either side, while lakes glisten in the distance. It's like something out of a fantasy novel, but it's 100% real. Now, if rift valleys were characters in a movie, they'd definitely be the strong, silent type. They don't make a lot of noise, well, except for the occasional volcanic eruption or earthquake, but they're always there, quietly shaping the world in their own slow, steady way. In fact, some of the most powerful earthquakes in history have been caused by rifting. As the plates pull apart, the tension can build up to a breaking point, and when it snaps, the ground shakes with all the fury of a plate tectonic tantrum. But don't worry, rift valleys aren't all about destruction. In fact, they're also places of incredible creation. Over time, the landscapes they carve out become home to all sorts of ecosystems. Plants and animals that you won't find anywhere else start to thrive in these unique environments. Take the Galapagos Rift, for example. It's a bit different from the other rift valleys because it's underwater, but the idea is the same. Here, deep in the ocean, life has found a way to survive in one of the harshest environments on the planet. Giant tube worms, crabs, and strange fish live around hydrothermal vents, thriving in complete darkness and in waters that are so hot, it's like swimming in soup. It's one of the most extreme examples of how life can adapt to the environments rift valleys create. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Rift valleys, as cool as they are, don't just pop up overnight. It takes millions of years for them to form. And even though they might seem like a finished product to us, they're still changing. The plates under your feet are moving ever so slowly, reshaping the landscape inch by inch. Who knows? Maybe in a few million years, the city you live in will be sitting on the edge of a brand new rift valley. If you're into hiking or adventuring, rift valleys are basically a giant invitation from nature. They've got mountains to climb, valleys to explore, and lakes to swim in, or at least admire from the shore, because some of those rift lakes are seriously deep. And the wildlife? Oh man! The wildlife is off the charts. From lions and elephants roaming the savannas around the East African Rift, to unique species of fish swimming in rift lakes, there's always something new to discover. Geologists love studying rift valleys because they give us a glimpse into the inner workings of our planet. By studying how rift valleys form and evolve, scientists can learn more about how Earth's crust moves, how new landforms are created, and even how life itself has adapted to these unique environments. And let's face it, who wouldn't want to spend their days studying a place as cool as a rift valley? So, the next time you hear about tectonic plates, don't just think of them as slow-moving chunks of rock. Think of them as the artists of our planet, slowly sculpting the landscape over millions of years. And rift valleys? They're some of the most dramatic pieces in that grand artwork. These giant cracks in the Earth's crust may start small, but they have the potential to reshape continents, create new ecosystems, and maybe even birth new oceans. Rift valleys are a reminder that even the slowest, most gradual processes can create something absolutely stunning. And while you might not be able to see it happening in real time, the Earth is constantly shifting, pulling apart, and creating something new. So the next time you find yourself gazing out at a mountain range, a deep valley, or a shimmering lake, just remember, you might be standing on the edge of something epic, something that's been millions of years in the making. And that, my friends, is the beauty of rift valleys.